One way. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our MFA, our second MFA session, talking about grad study at RISD. We have some wonderful faculty here who will introduce themselves in a minute, just on how this is going to go. This is an open Q&A session, so we want to answer all your questions. Make sure to put your questions in the Q&A portion of Zoom. Do not put them in the chat. Jen and I will be throwing in some helpful links throughout the presentation as they discuss certain things like on my work or career center or whatever it may be. We'll be putting links in the chat. So type of questions in a question and answer. It's Q and A little tab. And you can start putting your questions in right away. Jen and I can also answer some application questions, but really what we want to focus on today is obviously the portfolio, which is the biggest question, but feel free to ask us other questions as well. So I'll start. My name is Molly Pettengill. I see a lot of familiar names here. I'm the Associate Director for Graduate Recruitment, and we are happy to have you join us today and ask us some hard-hitting questions. Jen, you want to take it on next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Hewins, and I support Molly with the graduate recruitment effort here at RISD. It's just the two of us for graduate admissions. So if you have any questions, just feel free to send them our way. We're happy to help you with anything. All right, I'll pass it along. All right, I'll pass it along to Lane, who's next on my screen.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, I'm Lane. I am a joint hire between FAV, which is the Film Animation and Video Department, and then photography as well. And I'm the Graduate Program Director of Photography. I'm going to pass it to Susan, since you're next on my screen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susan Doyle. I'm the Graduate Program Director in Illustration, former department head of the undergraduate program, and I don't know what else to tell you, so I'm going to just pass it along to Diana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiana Bowie. I am the Graduate Program Director in Printmaking, and so, yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so start typing your questions now. They can be about the curriculum for these specific programs. It can be more broadly about what we're looking for and kind of work that we're making in our MFA programs here at RISD. The first question is a photography question. But again, to everybody here, we're so happy to hear, but this won't work until you ask some questions, throw them in the Q&A. Most likely if you're asking the question, someone else is thinking about that question too. So don't be shy. And okay, so the first question with regards to photography, is it better to show a wide breadth of imagery or show a body of work from one series? We get this question a lot too, Lane. Happy to have you answer that now.
Yeah, no, thank you, Erin. I get the question quite a lot too. And it's better to show a project, or two, with the 20 slides. It's better to kind of focus on something that will allow us to see how you think about photography, how you think about the image, rather than showing us more what you can do with the camera, if that makes sense. We're really, especially in the graduate department, really curious about what your research is, what you're thinking about, and how you kind of demonstrate that with your skill set. Does that seem right to you too, Molly?
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely. We say that for a lot of departments here. The breadth of imagery sometimes isn't as important as how you're, using your tools or using your materials. What are your themes? What sort of things are you thinking about making? And so that typically is a more cohesive body of work versus a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I was going to say there's also, next to the images, there's always that capacity to add information, which we read and really appreciate when you use that space to tell us what you want, what else you would like us to know. In your slide room application, it's I think sometimes people don't add information there, or they repeat the same information between slides, and it's a real opportunity for you to be able to add more information you might want us to know there.
Yeah, and context is a really big issue, I think, for a lot of people. They think we just understand this work as photography, or we understand the work as illustration, or printmaking, and we don't. We don't know how it's made, what it's made with. Maybe you're using, very ancient tools, right? So like all context does matter, and so sometimes it's really nice to be able to put that not on the page with the image. The image, you want to give that some space. There's a whole space on the side of Slide Room, slideroom.com. You can look at the formatting opportunities there, but really take the text off the screen, put it into that little description box that Lane is talking about. When you start your application, you'll get an invitation to Slide Room, you'll start seeing what I'm talking about. So it's super important that you guys start your application today if you haven't. Don't wait. Get in there. It's a little clunky. It's okay. We're gonna help you through it. But yeah, thanks. That's a good point. Jen, what else? What other questions we got out there? I can see if you're coming in. I think you're muted.
All the time. This is a great question, and I think that everybody can kind of speak to this question as well. We get it all the time. Is it okay to include pictures of our process in our portfolio? Is it better to only show final pieces? We get this all the time. So whoever wants to chime in first on answering this, that'd be great.
I can offer that in terms of like short videos that you might see on YouTube, like watching somebody paint. I would say those are not particularly helpful. But if you're making something and you've got some sketches and you've got sort of a history of how something came into focus for you, and you can sort of show that work in concert with the more final pieces, I think it helps us understand your thought process and how you like to arrive at what you consider final art.
Thank you, Susan. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, Tiny, look like you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah. I would definitely say if sometimes process images are great if it makes sense for the piece that you did. So if you were doing a process piece, right, and you care about how that result looked, but the process really mattered to the result, it's fine. I would say make it work with the piece. If it doesn't, then I'm like, just show the final piece with the detailed information of what you have so we can get a good grasp of what you did. And we don't want the focus to be on necessarily how you did it unless it's a performance perhaps, and it just works towards that piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is it relevant to the piece, to understanding it?
Yeah.
Right.
That would be the same, I think, in our department too. And installation photos, though, can sometimes, I think, be thought of as part of the process. And that often makes sense to me if the installation of the work adds to the meaning or adds to the way that the piece functions. Like it could be, the scale really matters in terms of the photograph, or if it's a photograph of sculpture, that might be really important to actually have scale and show that part of the process, which is the kind of more final form in a space.
Definitely. Thank you, guys.
This next,
this is a good question. Sorry, Jen. I have a question about illustration here that we get a lot. I'm sure you were going to do the same one. Oh wait, where'd it go? Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go to the.
So it's all right. I think I got it. So illustration. This is a fairly new program, Susan. So now we get the opportunity to talk more about it. Is our illustration program more geared towards artists who want to do commercial illustration or more towards fine arts gallery work? You're muted right now. It's okay. The game we play.
Yes. So I would say the emphasis of our program is on socially engaged image making and writing. So what we hope our students will work on is feeling confident to be kind of the art director and the initiator of art projects. Some of our artists want to work in gallery settings and other people want to work in sort of activist art. We have some people who are really interested in graphic novels and comics, and whether or not I don't know whether you would consider that commercial or not. I mean, ultimately they are sold, but I think the real emphasis on the program is on the conceptual end of the illustrator not waiting for someone to come to them with a job, but actually conceiving of a project, bringing it out into the public eye in whatever material or digital fashion that it needs to be seen in. I don't know if that answers your question. If you're saying commercial in the sense that are we helping people perfect a portfolio so that they can work for editors and art directors, kind of being on the tail end of that sort of publication process. I would say that is not our emphasis. There are other programs that really do that, and that is not our emphasis.
Yeah, and you make a really good point too, which is for every program that you're looking at different schools, they're all going to have different requirements. They're going to have different, potentially different, very different curriculum. You know, for example, I like to use Cranbrook, which is taught through artist residencies, right? So you don't have necessarily that depth of expertise that maybe somebody want to work with. So I think looking at the faculty bios, looking at the fact the student work answers some of these questions too. But thank you, Susan. That's so great. All right, Jen. What do we got here?
Just move. All right, this is more of a mechanics question to SlideRoom. Would you prefer the links attached in SlideRoom description box so that we can provide more context to a particular project? So I think Molly and I can answer that. Yes, that's something that you can definitely do. If you want to, to add more context and direct people to like your website or to a Google Drive or Behance somewhere where they can see more of your work in depth. That's something that you can definitely do. Again, that's in the description section of SlideRoom. Make sure there's no text on the actual image. All right, this next question.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
Sorry,
Molly.
just one more thing about that is that don't feel obligated to do that. The work really should speak for itself, minus a couple maybe context clues that you need to add to the description. You can't just give us a website and allow us to freely go through that. We will if we want to. Typically it's in your resume or your CV that you're submitting anyways. But yeah, to Jen's point, you can, but you don't have to.
Thank you. This next question's printmaking. Do you approach printmaking in a traditional way, like the litho, etching, etc., or do you encourage your students to a more interdisciplinary way of working with printed material, collage, bookbinding, book design, maybe even installation?
Excellent question. I would say yes, both and all the above. Especially in the graduate program, if you come into the program, you actually take actual classes. Some programs just focus on independent studies, and so you have to come in with all this knowledge. But at RISD, we definitely want to make sure if you wanted to do something and didn't get a chance, you can do it as soon as you get into the program. And then once you learn this process, we do push you a little bit out of the comfort zone, saying, hey, you learned this stuff, great, what else can you do? And so it's definitely a little bit of both. So we have a great diverse pool of students every time we bring in the grads because everybody's coming with different perspectives. We also like the idea about the theory of printmaking as well. Anything reproducible is a print. So if you are using found images, found materials that are printed and you want to use that in your work, that's great.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Right.
I like this next question because again, we're going back to process pieces. We can talk about process pieces, but we can also talk about works in progress. And if we think that it's important, if there are works in progress, would you allow it? And there's a second part to this question, but let's start with this one, with that question, which is about seeing pieces that are works in progress that are not completed yet. Yes or no?
Is this to me? I'm looking at it.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
anyone.
I think the notion of in progress is one for every artist. Like sometimes you think something is in process and then you come back a month later and you go, you know what, that's done. So I think we're all artists here, and we know that the way we feel attached to our work changes day to day, and that something might be in a state that we want to record because we're feeling really good about it and we want to kind of wait a minute and before we move on to it again. For an illustrator, that might be a little different because you might actually find it in a magazine or it might show up online, but that doesn't mean you're done thinking about it or working on it. So I think as artists, everything is always pretty much in process. So yes, that would be show it where if you feel good about it, you feel like it's something that shows us something about you, something that you feel says something, that you think is interesting, even if it's not quote unquote done, I would put it in. I think it's about what do you feel good about in your work and showing who you are as an artist so that, you know, you find the right program.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anything to add?
Yeah, I would add to that too, that I think that was such a wonderful answer, Susan. But that sometimes also when you're working in photography, or there's projects that you're going to be working on right now that you're going to keep working on probably for the next 5 years. So in progress and in process is a very complicated question if you're working in a multi-phase way or with a community of people that requires a lot of engagement. But if it's in process in a way that makes you incredibly excited, and it's important to the way that you think about your work, that's where I would include it. But as much as possible to include work that you're proud of, that feels like it really represents you and represents I want to be able to engage with you and understand what it is that you are making and why you make what you make. So that's more the trick, I think, or the thing
Yeah.
I want to see.
And that answers the second question, which is asking Susan directly, but I think all of us could agree that what do we, what excites and stands out most in a portfolio? And you just touched on it, something, that is uniquely yours, and engaging with, inviting us to engage with that, so does anyone want to add to what really stands out to them in a portfolio? Susan, I think you're muted.
Sorry. I would like to underscore that
Yeah.
RISD graduate students don't feel the need to stay within boundaries and that people are always trying new mediums. They're doing work that kind of straddles what academia would call, like, we have illustrators who are making prints, and the printmakers make books, and we make books, and we use photography, and we do design, and we use typography. So, and I know that all of you guys do too. So I think the beauty of our programs is that we recognize that your growth here cannot be predicted, and that when we look at your portfolio, we're looking for ideas. We're looking for someone who's willing to try to test the boundaries of their own thinking as they make material work. So those things should never be divorced. Like the way we think through our making as much as we preconceive of ideas. And that's what's an exciting portfolio, with someone who's really percolating on all those things at once.
And I can add to that. And also, are you an expert at what you're doing? It's not about anybody else, but if I look at it, if I'm like, this person knows this thing really, really well. And I can tell because all the ingredients are there.
Yeah, all great answers. Thank you, guys. Let's see here. Okay, I'm a sculptor and my pieces are very labor intensive, which means I don't have a high number of completed pieces for the last 2 years. To get to the 15 to 20 images, I'm planning on showing some detailed shots of my sculpture. How would that sit with the faculty? And while we don't have sculpture here, I think we can all sort of help answer that question, because I would probably say the same thing for some of you guys. It is 10 to 20 images, so 10 is the minimum. I don't think in our heads we're saying if we don't get to 20, you're not good. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's just this editorial piece to that. So more is not always better, is how I think I would say it. But what about you guys?
Yeah, I would say more is definitely not always better. And I would appreciate the idea of having, if there's like the main shot you're showing me of your sculpture, and then there's a detail shot, definitely still keep them separate. I think we get a lot of portfolios where people are creating PDFs of their work, and there's like 3 different images in one slide, which is really not doing yourself a service. So I think that if your work as a sculptor is labor intensive, and I'm looking at a detail shot where I can see that's hours of labor, or that's a particular skill that you've been crafting, kind of to your point, Tiana, like if it's something that you do that's really unique to the way that you work with the material, that's incredibly important for me to see. And because you're working in a 3D medium, I'm going to probably want to see multiple views of the same piece. So I would not worry about that. If the work though is going back, like if I'm seeing a portfolio where half of the work is from, let's say before 2020 or 2019, that can sometimes be, I will ask questions about it. I like in a follow-up or the interview, I'd want to know what has been going on recently. Like, do you not have the time to make your work? Is that what's going on? But I think as much as you can show of your current work as possible, that'd be great.
Yeah, and that can add to detail. I mean, shots of, if you have 3D work, you have sculpture, right? So instead of always having still images of you trying to get the entire, you can do video. There are sections in the slide room for video, and a video could be 1 minute, just a shot of like, you know, if you had a, I was gonna say a drone, you just like, if you pushing it really well to get all of that detail that we can see like that, that's also important.
Yeah, I've seen students submit time lapse. I've seen students submit GIFs. I mean, you can be as creative as you want with what a video is, right? So, however, the best way it is to see your work. I think also for sculpture, we're talking about 3D. Scale can be important sometimes too. So, if you do have something in taking an installation shot or something like that with somebody engaging with it, it gives us a sense of how, or what's this purpose of engagement, right? Jen, forward to you and looking at these questions over here. What do you got?
I saw a quick question that I'd like to just answer quickly. It's about our portfolio review days. Somebody's asking, do we offer portfolio review or feedback sessions prior to applying? Yes. We have 3 more online RISD hosted online portfolio review days. I can drop that link in the chat. These are hosted by admissions, and our reviewers are a mix of faculty and alumni reviewers. It's more alumni reviewers. These are general one-on-one 10-minute quick reviews. Again, they're general reviews. We don't necessarily always have representatives from each of our departments, each of our programs, but they are students who have gone through RISD and can give you their feedback on your portfolio. We do have 3 more.
Yeah,
and
right,
we are participating in the National Portfolio Day Association in Chicago this weekend, if you're joining us from Chicago area, and then one in New York in November on November 10th. So all that.
Yeah, I'll be at SA. Sorry, I'll just plug this here. I'll be at SIC on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's free. Go to nationalportfolioday.org and you can sign up there. But really, you don't even have to sign up. You could just show up and you'll find RISD. We'll be there with a couple alumni. So yeah, thanks, Jen.
Here. I'm just trying to
This is
find.
can I see a question that needs to be answered.
Oh.
Begging to be answered. So the question is for this student, a painter, but we can apply it to I think everybody here. Could painting applicants include mixed media, sculptural objects, installations, and photos, or do you want a more narrow focus? So I talk a lot about you got tools in your toolbox that maybe you don't necessarily use, but you have them. Well, if you're not using them, maybe don't show them, right? Or it's more important how you're using them. Anybody else want to riff off that?
Sure, I can jump in there. I think with the question is, does the painting department see painting more broadly? And the way RISD set up, it's going to mimic the contemporary art world, right? So yes, it's going to be more broad. So you'll see, they'll bring in painters, you're like, how is that a painting, right? It's sculptural, it's this.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's still in that language. It's having that same theoretical concept of what a painting is. And so yes, in that case, you can show things that are not in the traditional format of a painting on canvas, right? You can think about taking the canvas off, like Sam Gilliam, and what happens with that. And now it's sculptural. So,
yeah. Would you say that applies to your program as well?
I'd say so. I think that we are way more interdisciplinary than I think we even give ourselves credit for as a graduate program. Once you can have all kind of things, and then you come in and we actually push you, and you'll notice the students, like you said, are cross-disciplinary. Everybody's doing some of everything. I'll be walking down the street like, is that I see a screen in that class. It has nothing to do with what I'm doing over here, but we're all just utilizing so many tools. And I think that's the way, that's what we expect, I think. And so, yeah.
I feel like I was hearing you say something else though, Molly, which is like, people are coming in with a lot of skill sets and we don't necessarily need to see all of them. Like, it really should apply to what you want to do as a graduate student in our department. And why our department versus printmaking or illustration? Like there's something that we really, you're gonna end up with a lot of grad students in all of our departments who are going to be having quick conversations about this particular medium, which can be so stretched. And we'll be, you'll be talking with probably with Tiana, or with Susan if your work ends up spilling into that direction. But why our department also?
That's a good point, Lane. And actually, now think about it. There's times where we're looking at that portfolio, we're like, this actually is more textile, or this is more a painting department. Like we can see that maybe you apply for the wrong one and you didn't know you did, because this stuff is so geared in a way that's not specific to our department. So you do want to keep that in mind. Thank you, Lane.
I would say that also when you get to your thesis work, many students have forged a relationship with faculty from other departments as their work is sort of migrated in a certain direction. And that's a beauty of being in a grad community here, is that you can find an expert. Your faculty will say, wow, that's a little bit outside my wheelhouse, but I see where you're going with this. Let me introduce you to so-and-so, because that's what they do. And I think that's one of the beauties of being in a smallish graduate school. I mean, our school is not huge, but we have great kind of collaborative spirit between departments.
Thank you, guys. Jen, you see any good ones out here? Otherwise, I think we're getting a lot of the same questions, which is why we're kind of sifting through some of these here.
Can we answer this question that's by an anonymous attendee? I just really like this question. It's just, I was like, I think we should answer this one. It says, hello, this is a question. Oh, wait, where we go? Sorry. It's the one about, oh, here we go. Sorry. RISD is a top tier school, and I'm an artist that's been published worldwide in illustration, photography, and writing. I'm wanting to gain my MFA in photography in order to teach at the collegiate level. What will I learn at RISD that I already don't know? And I think that's such a great question for anybody who wants to go into an MFA program, who's like, what's the point? I got everything I need at this level. What are you going to do for me? And if you're talking about going into teaching at a higher level, an MFA is still absolutely one of the requirements. It's a terminal degree, and it's considered also equal to a PhD. There are PhD programs in arts, but they're usually in Europe. But in America, we still very much focus on the MFA as the credential you need to teach in higher education for full-time teaching, right? And so I also maybe we all can just answer, what would be the benefit of, I say in general, you gain a different perspective. Also, I don't know if you've ever done a residency, but I look at the MFA program also like a residency experience where you are more self-focused on what you want. And we just kind of like collaborate with you, but it's not undergrad. We're telling you these it's like, no, you get to decide what you want for yourself as an artist, as a maker, and to be challenged, because you could get comfortable in your field. And now we're saying, okay, why are you here? So you have to answer that question too. So I just thought that would be a great one. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with so much of what you just said, but I don't know how your two departments work, but we're definitely not a finishing school. It's not something where we're not wanting to necessarily, it's not that we want your practice to change at all. If what you're doing is what you're really invested in, but the 2 years that you're spending with us, we're really hoping that you're wanting to go deeper into something in your work, that you're experimenting and exploring something, because you're gonna be forced to, in a certain sense. Like that's the nature of grad school in so many ways, that you're with this wonderful group of artists. So you're all engaging in these dialogues together. And so I think giving yourself the gift of being surprised by your practice of learning something totally new about the way that you make, that's what I would hope you would be getting out of grad school. And yes, part of the point of having an MFA is that we say this person can teach their discipline at a graduate level. And that's, you know, I would say I'm imagining, and I mean, all of our actual thesis projects are incredibly robust. The paper, the committee, the work itself, the book you have to create, which I know a lot of students already come in. I mean, we have people who are probably in a similar state that you would be entering in, but it's still that commitment to delving into your work in a really intense way. And that can sometimes also mean taking yourself out of the professional market somewhat for 2 years to give yourself the space to really focus. So that's another thing to think about, is if you're really rocking in your career at this current moment in time, you will have to give yourself the space to breathe and imagine and look at your work from a critical perspective with a group of other people who are also looking at your work critically.
Yeah. And part of the reason why you're applying is because you want to come to grad school. You think it's the right time in your life, right? But it is a precious time. Not many of us can do multiple sessions for those 2 years. So, you know, making sure that you are putting the energy in that you'll get out of it. So yeah, I mean, I think that was a great question. Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Jen, what do you see out there? I mean, I see a bunch of questions that want to dive a little bit deeper than just the portfolio, but I think we should stick to the portfolio for a couple more minutes here.
There's a great question, and we get this every session. Coming from a non-art design background in undergrad and from undergraduate, what can I include in my portfolio to sort of compensate for this gap?
I have some advice that I've been giving. I think because our program, you're right. You say you don't have a concentration in the thing, but you see this program, you're like, but I've been making work in this conversation separately from whatever I got my degree in an undergrad, right? We are more open to just looking at the portfolio as long as you have your BFA, of course, to get to the MFA program. But say there's a missing link. You're like, there's things I need to do to make my portfolio way more robust, but I am not in school. I don't have that. I will just throw out some going back to school, there are, if you look in your city, your town, any institution, they tend to have continuing education courses. And I always say utilize your local continuing education resources so you can kind of stay in the game if you're like, I know I need to get my portfolio up to snuff for this thing. And some, because it's hard to do that if you're like, there's a gap, there's a space missing, and you're like, how do I make this work stronger with the instruction that I had prior? So that's just my one little advice that I'm always giving people. They're like, I didn't even think about the college next to me having these, and they do have courses.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Utilize your local resources, 100%.
And RISD also offers a continuing ed program as well. These are taught on the RISD, a mix of online and the RISD campus. They have certificate programs in a ton of different fields. So I encourage you to check that out. That's a great resource as well.
And they're cheap. That's the important part. They are expensive.
I would also like to add that we really like having people who didn't have a BFA in illustration because there's such an emphasis on authorship in our program. We have quite a few people who are published writers. We have people who've been studying psychology, or bringing a love of science. We had a bona fide scientist who'd worked in the Arctic cap. So, I mean, I think we're looking for people who have a drive to learn and connect their art to making. And if you haven't had the luxury of an undergraduate BFA, but you have this other thing, and that's, you're just like a lifelong curious person who's got a skill set that you've developed. We're looking for people who have dedicated significant personal time to making a portfolio, but we don't expect that everybody, in fact, we don't want everybody to have come from an undergraduate illustration program.
Yeah, the diversity of education, Susan, to your point, is spans across all of our 18 programs. We have a lot of students applying from different majors. The next question is actually about photo in the same vein here. I don't have a formal photographic, educational background, but have been practicing photography independently for a long time. So this is more to do with the letter's recommendation, but I think that the person's asking, would they be even qualify?
Not at all. No, we so welcome people who are new to that particular, to like our medium in photography. I mean, right now we have a couple of grad students who were taking, they're coming from completely different disciplines before they come into photography. It can create really exciting dynamics inside of a cohort. Which is a really big thing that we're also looking for. It's not that we're always just choosing like the top 8 people that we're like, these are the best photographers that we're finding. It's also very much about creating a cohort of people that we think are going to be excited about each other's work and having different ways of thinking about the image. So no, especially if you have fallen in love with making images and this is a moment where you're like, wow, I really need to be in grad school to give myself that time to think about it. It sounds like you're at the perfect moment to become
Yeah,
a photographic
absolutely.
graduate program. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So absolutely, you were absolutely qualified. Bachelor's degree is the pre-qualification for any of our programs, actually.
And can I add to
Oh.
that? Quick?
Yeah, sure.
In art, in same lane, I swear, like in printmaking right now, we have a surgeon. She's legit doing surgery
cool.
in Boston and then coming to do her MFA in printmaking. I was like, what? How are you sleeping? She's like, it's fine. And so no background in printmaking, just always wanted to get to focus in that area, but did some work enough for portfolio to be strong enough to be like, this is what I want to do. And they really want to cross the ethics of medical with art and the humanity of art. So they have this bigger conversation that they were applying with. I was like, wow, okay. And then we have a clinical psychologist who's also like working with people with mental health and then coming to get their MFA. So that's just to give you some examples of, you just show up with your portfolio. It's good, we're strong, we here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like baked into our graduate program that let's say you're coming in and you've never worked in a darkroom, but you really want to be making prints. You can either take a course in it completely. We would completely encourage that, or TA for. We also would often have people TAing for those types of classes so that you're gaining that knowledge while also kind of taking the course, but really not having to take it in the same way that an undergraduate or another student would be. So we're not expecting you to come in knowing how to use anything at like a huge proficiency. It's more about how you're thinking about the image and your passion for it.
And I just want to get to answer the question that was also in that bigger question. Thank you guys. I think we covered a lot of ground there, which is good. But this is about the letters of recommendation. If they aren't coming from those backgrounds, who then could speak to their success here at RISD, or their potentiality here at RISD, right? So I think it is someone who that you've worked with in the professional world, or someone that you work closely with, maybe their studio mates, someone who understands your work and your process, to help us get to know you better. It doesn't have to be from an academic, if you've been out of school for a while, we don't always expect that. And even if they are academic, they may not know your current practice, so that doesn't really help us so much, right? So that's my shtick on letters of recommendation. Let's move on to some of these. We're getting some meatier questions here, so just get ready. Okay, so this is for Susan. Susan, you mentioned the program focusing on socially engaged image making and writing. Can you elaborate on the writing side of the program, and should writing be something we include in our portfolio?
Mute. So we have a writing class that's required in every single term. The first term, it really looks at theory and methods of how illustrations function. The second semester is all about narrative. So you're taking a creative writing class, a narrative focused studio, and an expository writing class that looks at narrative historically in the written form. And then your third semester, you are asked to partner with either a local nonprofit, a researcher doing some work in a topic that touches on either science, the ecology, the environment, or human, human subject, like mental health. Like, so students actually work on a topic and create a body of work that's related to, I'm going to say, some volunteer and some research. It just depends. They get to pick who they work with. And then you move into your thesis work, which requires that you write a full-length paper. And a lot of people at that point are writing their own narratives and then illustrating them. So every single semester has some writing, and it's an expectation that you're able to express yourself through your writing as much as your image making. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. I think actually students come here and they don't realize how much writing and research we are doing. So if anything, that's something to potentially prepare for, in terms of your own work and your own writing and research that you do with your own work. Let's see here, Jen, I'm looking for some specific program ones here. Do you see any that?
This is a
really-
question. This is for Susan. This question is for illustration and graphic design. Are you looking for artists or designers or somewhere in between? What pieces are you looking forward to?
We are looking for work that shows your passion for making images, for making pages, for making art. Right now we have a former book designer. We have a former graphic designer. Last year we had someone who did all animation. So I think it really is about you bringing you to the program and thinking about, when I say authorship, what does that mean? You might end up being, you might be really interested in children's books, but you might also be interested in scientific illustration. I can't say, but graphic design never is not a part of those things. I can't think of anything in publishing that doesn't actually benefit from a background in graphic design, even if you, in the end, want to make the pictures too. So it's both.
Great, thank you. We've been getting this question a lot. I'm not sure if it's the same person asking this question over and over again, or if it's different people asking it. But I've seen, the phrase mood boards a lot this season. Do concept boards, mood boards, and research add up, or should we not include them?
Good one. And we do get that question a lot.
I would personally say do not include them unless they're part of a professional project that you did, where the mood board expressed your intent and then you're able to show that intent as a piece. Essentially, mood boards are sort of gathering the work of others and showing a range of possibilities that you might then bring to your own project. So unless you really used those as part of something that you can show the final thing and it was professional, I would leave them out.
Anybody else?
Same.
Yeah.
Same
Great.
answer. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, the end result is more important than how it started. I think similarly in the statement of purpose, my best advice that I can give for those of you coming from different programs or thinking about that process, the mood board, that research being so important, thinking about your statement of purpose of not where you've been, but where you want to go, or what the potential is. So thinking about what is happening and what are you thinking about right now. So the ones that start when I've always wanted to be an artist since I was 5 years old, how is that relevant to what we're doing right now? So always kind of asking yourself that question, not just with the statement of purpose, but with the work that you're submitting as well. I think it'd be really helpful. All right. Next question is to all three of you. Can I ask what drew each of you to teach at RISD in particular? And how you feel about our MFA program here at RISD, distinctly from where you experienced your own MFA? Which I think and Susan, your case is RISD. So I think we can all answer this question.
Right.
Yeah.
So I actually got my dual degree, my dual MFA in painting and printmaking, because back then, Tiana, it was conjoined. It felt like there was a brief period. And honestly, I thought I wanted to be a painter more than anything, but I fell in love with printmaking. And I think it's because it's so much of drawing, and I had come from 10 years as a graphic designer. And so those things together made a lot of sense for me. And honestly, RISD was a place where I just shed all my old stuff and like found myself as an artist, and I was very grateful to the school and wanted to teach here. So that's how that happened.
Everybody's journey is a little different. Who wants to go?
I can. I was at SMFA for my graduate class, for my graduate studies, and I was at NYU for my undergraduate, first in directing and then in digital media. And I loved both of those schools, but RISD, this is like, I feel like so bad. I feel like I'm going against my alma maters, but RISD students are phenomenal. I love the students that come and choose our program. I also love teaching in Providence because it's kind of a wonderful small space to be able to really focus on work. I think it creates really intense communities that are really talking and having dialogues. And I mean, I also love all the rest of the faculty. I'm such like a poster child for this, but I think that everyone has really expansive ways about thinking about their medium. And I don't know if that's a coincidence for faculty here, but for instance, my background is in video art and performance mostly, and they wanted me in photography because I can have those kinds of conversations with students and I teach those types of courses, as well as teaching traditional photography. But I think that that's something that's unique to the school, is that there's a lot of different ways of turning something on its head here, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it's a good question. I went to my education was at universities, so not private art schools. My undergrad was a state college in Illinois in a cornfield, but it was like 15,000 students. And then I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison for grad school. And for me, when I was an undergrad, I studied metalsmithing very heavily, and then graphic design. So my background, and then I fell in love with printmaking because I was able to combine the labor and intensity of metalsmithing and the image making of graphic design all into one trifecta. And then when I went to and the difference between, I would say, what makes RISD program distinct than maybe where I went to Madison. First of all, Madison's huge. You have 45,000 students. The art department can sometimes get swallowed up in all the other things happening. But to have a school dedicated just to the thing and does that thing really, really well and take it so serious, where you're not fighting and competing for resources with another, it's like that right there alone is just like, oh, it's like the coming home of like, this is what I'm talking, this is how it should be everywhere. I think RISD sets a beautiful precedence of what when you take art very seriously in this country. And so, and me bringing in my background and my knowledge to RISD, because at the end of it, it's a smaller art school that always does a great job of benefiting from everybody's diverse perspective coming from different parts. And luckily we have, Brown University there. So RISD students who want to be a part of a university is like, boom, I can take classes over there. And they do. So I think it's just a awesome culmination of everything that I've been through in my academic experience that I'm happy to be a part of and help bring that thing for the next generation.
Yeah. And this was not asked to me, it was asked to you guys, but I feel compelled to answer as well. This is totally, so I went for my BFA in a large university system like you, Tiana, and then I went to a private small art school for my MFA, and they're both in painting. But I went to UMass Amherst. We're talking 30,000 students going then to a school of 1,500, which is, we're 2,500. So it's a very small school. And I was looking around like, everybody speaks my language. It was like a light bulb had turned on and those conversations could have happened where they wouldn't have happened elsewhere. So I think that that's kind of the thing that we're all saying, is that the opportunities to turn that light bulb on, to get excited about things, have conversations, like really dive in to take things seriously happens here. And it's exciting for someone not in the faculty as well. We all get to enjoy it. So yeah, great question. Thank you so much for asking that question. Let's get back to portfolios. But I think that was a good one. Jen, what else we got out there? Here. Questions. Oh, here we go. Here's a good question about portfolio. This is asking about the ceramics program, but I think it can apply to literally any program we offer here. Is should I prioritize technical skills, conceptual depth in my portfolio?
Oh, wait, can you repeat that?
Yeah, they're asking, should my portfolio prioritize technical skills or conceptual depth in my portfolio? I think that it's not one or the other, it's a and or
Yep.
situation. So maybe we can.
I agree. Showing the breadth of your work. So the breadth, right? What does that look like overall? How did you get to where you got with all your work? I always say, I think the word cohesion always terrifies people because they're like, oh, that's so boring. But cohesion just shows the maturity of where your art has come all together. That's all it's about. It's telling us the story of how did this come to be, and how do we see it visually without us having to see process, right? We could just look and go, wow, they've brought it all together. And so that's just my response when I'm looking at portfolios.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I don't know what ceramics, I can't speak for them, but
Yeah.
it's very rare that we have a portfolio that's only one thing. Usually what you end up thinking about when you look at a portfolio is what is the continuity of thought and the continuity of spirit of the work. And so somebody might be tinkering with an idea, but they're not quite getting at it in the drawing or the weaving or the ceramics. So they're also bringing that to some other material, but they're still themselves. That's still that perspective and that avenue of thinking pervades the work and the approach, regardless of the material. So I would say, I imagine that ceramics probably feels the same way. I would say stay away from showing assignments, like
Yeah.
where somebody asked you to throw a pot that was 3 inches tall, like, okay, so you have, that's like kind of doing your figure 8 in ice skating. Like, I don't think that we're that much interested in that. I think what we're interested in is, where do you want to go as an artist and how do you think?
And unless I was going to say, Susan, unless that assignment that you did just happens to be the wow factor, because sometimes that happens where like that one assignment took you to a whole nother level and everybody's like, this is the one.
Touche.
Totally, but it needs to be the one, because sometimes you can sometimes tell when you're like, I know this assignment, I've given this assignment.
Exactly. I completely agree with you guys. When we talk about that in our admissions portfolio tips, we kind of do a do's and don'ts. One of the things I say don'ts is assignment-based work, because it's through the lens of the person who gave you the assignment. It does not include, right? But that doesn't mean that you didn't, touch upon some kind of magic that then spurred everything else. So completely to your point, Tana, I completely agree. But just be wary of those assignment-based works. Like, don't submit them, basically. All right. I was just typing a question, Jen, so I don't know if you have any ready to go. So, because I'm gonna type an answer to this guy.
Is it the question about like who is the RISD student? Like what is the traditional, student?
Yeah. So I was going to type this, but maybe we should just say it out loud. Okay. So the student is asking, they're a non-traditional student, felt really out of place. What is our age range, the maturity level like with RISD grads? And how would I fit in, late to mid 40-year-old pursuing an MFA? So I'll tell you, it's very different from one program to the next. But we are not looking at your age or your race or anything like that as part of the review process. So really it's about creating that cohort, which some of these faculty have already mentioned before, is creating cohorts and how you guys are going to speak to one another. Your lived experience is definitely going to come into play potentially, and we can see that within your work, within your writing, in other ways. That being said, if you're going into architecture, most of that program is quite young because they're coming right from an undergraduate program. And it's also a very big program, but 80 to 100 students in that graduate program. Whereas in printmaking, you guys have what, maybe a solid 16, 17 students total?
For the grad program,
Yeah.
maybe 13, something.
Yeah,
Not
so
very-
that's where I say it's very different for each program, whereas in the MFA programs here, we sort of have a little more flexibility in terms of age, where we have some requirements in the architecture world that mean either you've had more working experience or lived experience, versus some students who are coming right out and getting right into some of these programs. So depends on the department.
And this question is really about the culture of RISD, right? Like, what is the overall culture? I would definitely suggest when you apply, come visit. You don't, spending 2 years in a place is a long time. And you don't want to be somewhere and be like, this is the worst thing I could have done. You know, you want to feel like this, I can be here for 2 years. So I would just say, definitely come visit.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the link to our in-person open house here. Tana, thank you so much for teeing that up so well. We have an in-person open house. It's on November 22nd. Each department will have a liaison that takes them through the department, look at the studios, look at the shops, the access, ask questions. Sometimes the faculty who are there and able to speak with you do so. But it is sort of opening those doors that are typically locked and we don't necessarily see them because they're private studio spaces, right? And private shops. I can't just go walk into the hot shop, not allowed. So I'm gonna give you guys a link to the open house here because I completely agree. Come check us out. But a lot of what we've been saying is regardless of where you're from, your education, regardless of your background, regardless of how old you are, we need to know what you're doing right now. And the best thing you can do for yourself is be authentic and be genuine to who you are as an artist and not try to bend anything to fit any kind of mold that you expect of RISD. And I think that's kind of just to kind of wrap up everything that we've been talking about. So those things don't necessarily matter. It's the work that you're making. And that being said, we have 1 minute left, Jen. Any last minute questions here?
No, I think we had some really great questions here. We went beyond the topic of just the portfolio, which was really great. They were, I know we didn't have representation from all of our programs today. I put a link in the chat for our online open house. We will have an online session for each of our degree programs. You can ask these questions along with questions about the curriculum, the academic student experience at those like 1 hour department specific sessions. So please sign up for those to get some more information. And we just look forward to seeing you at the rest of our webinars where you can learn more. You can always email us your questions and we'll direct them accordingly. But yeah, that's
Come say hi to me in Chicago if you're in Chicago on Saturday.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks to our faculty for taking the time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. So appreciate you. And everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks.